Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and the title of this episode, Oops, did I say that? So it's sort of a question, and it kind of begs the idea, why did that come up? Well, it has to do with telling a little lie. A little or small, it just has to do with telling lies, and I'm going to help you clean that up. First of all, the thing about a lie, it's obvious that somebody has discovered that you didn't tell it straight. And by doing so, you're going to receive some flack about it. People are going to not trust you. And how do you deal with those things when they happen? I think you have to ask yourself, why did you tell a lie in the first place? And then, so that requires a little self-examination. Sometimes we do it because we don't want to be confronted, because there's something that we're trying to hide and we don't want it known. Sometimes that's very underhanded. It's very clandestine. You know, we're not being honest or straight with people. And you know what? Those things happen. But it's more important to think about how you're going to gain someone's trust, because that ultimately is what it's about. There's a betrayal, and in order to fix that, you are then going to go through the ringer. You have to expect that you can't, when you've told a lie to someone, you can't just not expect to be called on it. And gaining someone's trust isn't so much about necessarily what you're going through as it is what they are going through, what emotions they have, because everybody has their own reaction to it. Some people who've been in the process who may be a little more empathetic, because if they've told a lie, they know how it feels. They understand the confrontational aspect, and they may even help you through it. They may be very gracious about it because they understand there's a lot of awkwardness about this, and then cleaning it up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a repeat of it. But if you are in that experience of something like this, then, and I'm saying, say you're the person that said it. I'm going to, spin the table around and give you some insight as to what it's like to be the person that's been lied to. But if you're the person that said it and you've been called on it, obviously you feel uncomfortable. And there's some loss associated with this. So for whatever reason you told the story that wasn't the truth, whatever version of it, you got to ask yourself why. And you can't necessarily ask these questions why and then say that's a justification for it, because that then begins to wonder, you have to think about how it landed on the other person. And I'm not so much talking about what it is you've lied about. I'm just talking about the having the discussion, because there's lots of stories that people tell, and they have lots of reasons. But the degree of it is not really the topic of this at the moment. It's really about how, when you've said something to someone and it's not the truth, how do you regain their trust? Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is really own up to it, and that means owning up to the story that you told. The listener, the person who was lied to, may go a lot of different directions about what they think it means. And, you kind of step into that when you don't tell the truth. You're kind of in the impact of how people react to things. And you really don't know the answers to those. See, people have been betrayed all throughout life. And obviously they've been lied to long before you. And, before you said something. And when that happens, they are going to be reacting out of their own stuff, either their own enlightenment or their own toxic response to this whole thing. And some people become very dramatic, and that can even be more traumatizing to you than just having told the truth in the first place, because some people tend to get really, really demonstrative when they've been lied to. They make a bigger story out of it, and that might teach you something about, obviously don't lie, but that might teach you something about the person in general. If you were lying to not have a confrontation, well, guess what? You really got a situation to manage now. And if it's a significant other, then you're going to have to live with that and be reminded of that. And so far, I've just been talking about the word lie in general, but I think I'm going to expand this. This is a relationship show. I'm going to talk about something real specific and say lying until you have somebody else in your life that they don't know about. One of the other shows I talked about polyamorous relationships, and that's where there is a disclosure about other relationships. And you have that open discussion and decide whether that's something that works for you and the partner. And you talk about the jealousy, you talk about all of those things. But when you don't do that above board, then it falls into the category of lie. And when we're talking about romance, these things are very charged because these things have emotions all around them. Well, as I've been saying, I'm going to talk about how do you recover from that? Well, opening up and telling the truth, meaning a full disclosure, is something that's very important in order to regain the confidence. And you can't claim to justify not telling the truth. You can tell a story about it, but you can't claim to justify it because the listener, the person who you lied to, it's about trying to get them back in their life and not lose them. And if you're a guy who has lied about having an affair on the side and your girlfriend finds out about it, well, she's not going to trust you. And the same thing for a woman. If you have a significant other and they found out about your extra outside relationship, then you're going to have to work a lot to get the relationship back. And the thing is, you need to ask yourself, why do you want to? And that's a very fair question. Maybe you don't want to, and maybe that is why you were lying about it, and you this was your release valve to do something this outrageous. And if being in the relationship with that person wasn't working for you and you just did something outside with another person, you might find out that you didn't want to be in that first relationship, the one that you lied to. Hope that wasn't too convoluted. But that's a very, very important question to ask yourself, because obviously you're going to put yourself through something when you get confronted about it and all the questions that someone has about the betrayal. That is a very tough place to be in. So if you're going to go through it, which obviously you must want to if you're still there, then you really need to ask yourself, do you want the relationship? And what's important about it? And you need to be able to convey that, because you're going to have to hang on to that when the possibility, the impulse to cheat comes again. It's those types of impulses. You have to have self-control. You have to exhibit the understanding in yourself. Carry that with you like it's your wallet in your pocket. You need to really it needs to be tangible to you. Because if you have poor impulse control, then you're liable to do it again and again. And you can't keep living your life with one betrayal after the other, because it definitely degrades the quality of your life. And for those around you who are in the impact of it, it stresses them out as well. So I could honestly say that I don't think that that's something you really want to have following you around, because it's a way of operating that's not healthy. People find out, people have a sense about that in a liar, and then you tend to get treated a certain way because people just don't feel, they don't feel comfortable around you. So you can't always be the con man or woman that you admire on television because they're able to get away with things. When those types of things happen in real life, they tend to eventually catch up to you, and it just erodes the quality of your life. So I'm going to take a break right at the moment, and we'll talk about some other topics.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we're back. This is Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I was talking about, I entitled this, Oops, Did I Say That? And it was more of an idea that, I kind of touch it lightheartedly, but I want to talk about the subject of lying and why people do so. And if you're a person who's lied to your significant other or somebody you're involved with, and then you've been caught in that lie, it's about how do you fix that? Well, I've talked a little bit about what a person goes through when they've been betrayed and why you might get the reaction that you do. And I've said something about examining yourself as to why you would tell a lie. Is it the confrontation about it? Is it something that you're ashamed about? And, there's a lot to it. I'm just trying to simplify it because I am on a podcast and, I'm not in a therapy session with you, and trying to at least give you some ideas about what to think about. And if it's something that you've experienced, it gives you something to consider. So, oh, wow, okay, that was why I reacted so strongly. Everybody has their own reaction to betrayal. And some people have experienced it, and it depends on what level it is. Did somebody steal a couple of pennies from you? Or did somebody steal thousands of dollars? Did they, rob you of your trust? And again, there's so many different aspects to it. And I wasn't really being specific initially about what kind of lie, but then I transitioned to talking about, well, if you lied about a relationship with somebody, this is the relationship podcast. So if you lied about having a relationship with someone else, and then someone finds out about it, well, how is the primary relationship going to feel about having not been told the truth? I touched on briefly about polyamorous relationships, which is something of you have more than one partner, but it's about the disclosure of that, which keeps that from being a lie. When you haven't told the truth about that, the reaction that people have is the reaction that people have, and you can't control that. But if you want to keep that relationship with someone, as I've said, you need to, first of all, own up to it. Not try to justify it, not try to make it somebody else's fault that you went on out and cheated. You have to own up to it. But part of that process is also to do the self-examination. Why did you do it? Is the person that you were with, is there something about the quality of the relationship that you didn't like? And you have to ask yourself, why did I not speak to that? Is it because you deal with the confrontation of that and that makes you very uncomfortable? These are all very important questions, because in order to be able to move forward, answering those is going to give you something about how you've been living your life and about how you may be dealing with things in general. Because if you deal with things by sweeping them under the rug, which is oftentimes what lying is, because you lie to yourself as well. If you deal with things by sweeping them under the rug, they eventually are going to become something that's going to come back. So this is the reason we're having the conversation. It's not to say stop lying because it's bad. It's about having the understanding, what are you doing to yourself when you get into that space? What types of feelings are you having? What are you avoiding? Are you avoiding taking responsibility for something? Or maybe you're taking responsibility for something that you shouldn't. And the lie in and of itself allows you to just not deal with it at the moment. Well, ultimately, these things come back. It's like looking in the mirror. You keep seeing it there, and it's going to come up at some point in time in your life. If not in the story that you're telling yourself today, maybe in some other way, maybe in the behavior that you have. But what happens when you lie in your relationship is, see, the thing about being in love with someone is you learn to depend on them. You learn to do things in a certain way. It's a dependence. It's like driving down the highway and there's that line down the middle of the road. You don't expect somebody to cross over that. See, that's like a median. It's there to protect both of us. And that's what trust is. You have a trust. You may never have crossed over that line with the understanding that you were doing something that you shouldn't be doing. But when it happens in a relationship, there are consequences. And it's about understanding that ahead of time. But once you've crossed over that line and you've had an accident, okay, you have to take responsibility for your part. And sometimes you don't actually get to be the judge. You don't get to determine that. Sometimes you need a referee. And those referees being the way of therapists, counselors, somebody who's more of a neutral party, who can be constructive in examining this. But, there are books out there that'll help you get some understanding as to what kinds of questions you need to be asking yourself, some of which I've raised already. You're afraid of confrontation. Are you covering up for something? And then realizing that you don't get out of life. No one is perfect. Everyone we know has told some sort of fib, some sort of story and they get the blowback from it. But now when it comes to getting the trust, there is a part that the person who's been lied to, there is a role that they have in this, and they need to learn how to be a listener. Sometimes we get in relationships and we find out that our partner is not a very good listener, and it's very scary because when we got into the relationship, that we're in that honeymoon phase, everything is hunky dory. Well, when those things change, it has an impact. And that's something to deal with. You may have to confront your partner and say, hey, you're not as good a listener as you used to be. And there could be reasons for that. But that, and I'm speaking to the person that's been lied to, listening without necessarily having judgment is a very important thing to bring to this conversation. Because what you want to encourage is you want to encourage open and what I call honest dialogue. This isn't the opportunity to start pointing fingers. This is really, really the time when, and it's probably the hardest time in the world to do, is when you've been betrayed. But when people are in this particular space, oftentimes they're more willing to be honest. That is, honest to you, because they realize what is at stake. And it's every bit of the opportunity to ask really important questions. And I say it's important that you think about these things in isolation, because one of the things that happens when people have been lied to, and it's been, the relationship thing, is we tend to run and tell our friends. And obviously there is the episode where, oh, wow, you tell your friends and they jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, honey, he's no good. Or they'll tell the guy, man, she's no good for you, and this, that, and the other. Well, if you want the relationship, then, who am I to tell you that you can't be with that person? Because I've always said you love who you love, and for whatever reasons. There are so many reasons why we love the person we love, and we don't understand them ourselves. Maybe it's because of the mystery. Wow, that was episode 40. I talked about, are you a mystery? And navigating past that then becomes very thorny. That road is not smooth. Okay, that is not fresh laid pavement there. That is the rocky road. But if you are willing to do the work to go through that process, you will come out better for having learned something about yourself, learn something about your partner, learn something about how you operate. And it could be something about lying that you've done for so long you don't even realize you're lying, that you're just covering up. And that's an example of that. That's an illustration of something that happens. Sometimes people are so used to covering up because they want things to be smoothed over. They're afraid that if it doesn't look good on the outside, if it's not taken care of, that it's going to fall apart. And sometimes it needs to fall apart so we can fix what's rickety about it and get on to a better life. How sad to have been in a relationship that is just a lie. How sad is that? When really it can be worked on and that you can get some quality out of it. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about, quality of life issues. Think about it. Time is something that you don't get back. It's linear. And in life, you begin and when you're born, and then you die. And you cannot turn the clock back. So it's about a quality of life issue. And truth, whatever it is, whether it's your conversation with yourself, your relationship with your significant other, your children, coworkers, friends, that it's very important. And I share this from the viewpoint of people who have lived a long life, and they've passed this advice on to me, or their wisdom on to me. And I've taken it and I've cherished it, because I obviously cannot live every experience in life, but I enjoy listening to other people share their wisdom, and it has helped me to learn to see things about myself that wasn't always perfect. I was a person that did not tell the truth. I didn't tell it straight. I told stories because I was afraid of confrontation. So I know from where I speak, and I'm a pleaser, and pleasing people was something that I enjoyed. But what I wound up taking on is fixing things because I didn't tell it the way it was at the moment. I said how I wanted it to be. But by doing it the way that I did, I wound up taking on the expense, the emotional, not only the financial, but the emotional expense of repairing things constantly. And it took more and more of my time. I wound up spending inordinate amounts of time doing things in the shadows, trying to make it the way I said it was, rather than having said it the way it was in the beginning. And by and large, having learned from that experience, I've moved forward to be able to call it the way it is at the moment. And, that's just part of my life's journey. And for what it is, I'm better for it now. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. But I didn't really begin to pay the price for it until, I was found out. And, was it, would you call it a white lie? Would you call it a big lie? It didn't matter. Because it became something of a problem for me. And it was a habit that I had to learn to fix. That pleasing people wasn't which I thought was important at the time, wound up costing me. And I had to fix that and learn to please myself. And what was important at that time was having honor and credibility. So when I learned that my credibility was at stake, I began to change how I communicated for the sake of having a future with people. And now, when people trust me, they trust me even more. And my honesty doesn't mean that I'm brutal. I'm not. You always say things with tact, but it's about knowing it, coming straight with people, and appreciating yourself. And it's not always the easy thing to do. Remember, I've been on both sides of this. It's really been about learning how to be diplomatic, and I've had my own issues with people not being straight with me. And trying to have a reaction that allows a person to be in their own space, and then it be a teachable moment, as opposed to going on a rant and telling them how bad of a person they are, because I know what confrontation is like and how scary it can be. And so that's my own story. But I'm going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back and wrap this up.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm John Johnson, and I've been talking about, oops, did I say that? And it was more the idea that we were talking about storytelling, or lying is another way of saying it, and dealing with the betrayal, how you clean that up with people, and being honest and telling the truth, and understanding what other people go through when they have been lied to, and how you don't have control over their reaction. They're going to react to it. But knowing that when you are in a relationship with someone, that you owe it to them to be upfront, be truthful, and because it's not only about just being honest with them, but it's about being honest with yourself. Sweeping things under the rug, there's obviously something about that. It's expensive in terms, not so much financially, but emotionally, because whatever it is that you are not dealing with is going to come back at you at some point in time. It's like a cancer. It's eating at you. It's beneath the surface, and being in denial about it does not make it go away. It just means it just piles up. And if at some point in time, you will have to deal with it, and it becomes obviously more It becomes, the opportunity becomes more public, and there's humiliation involved in that. And when that happens, then the damage control it's immense. Then you kind of do something, it becomes very political, and that could be very hurtful to a lot of people. And when you're responsible for a lot of things, and then you've been found out, well, it's humiliating. It's humiliating. So if that's who you are, and you are in that space in life, think about why you're telling stories, lies, and in order to clean things up, which is what I call it, cleaning it up, you're going to have to You're going to have to share some truth with people. But first, get truthful with yourself as to who you are, what you're about. And you are bigger than that. And you have to find out what your fears are. And I would certainly encourage you to get help with that. There's therapists, there's counselors, and they deal with things on a very personal, very one-on-one level to give you the confidence to be in life, to be who you are. Because maybe you're not who you are. Maybe you're carrying a persona of something, or imagining yourself being someone else. Imagine yourself being Superman when that's not who you are. It's great to be adored and to have the admiration of other people, but not at the expense of not telling the truth. And that's an example of something that happens because making people happy on that scale tends to bring some sort of esteem boost. Well, I can tell you that when people find out the truth about you, you're going to be headed for a fall. And we've all seen individuals that's happened to. And if you're not, I'm not sure what planet you're living on. So, but that sort of ties into, I'm talking about the emotional part. That sort of ties into why people tell lies and make up things. And why is that important in a relationship? Well, it's important because when you have a significant other, you develop a certain amount of trust in what goes on in the relationship. So with that, you have a great deal of responsibility. And, hold that together. That's real important. Hold that together. Being honest, being truthful, depend on your partner, and I think you can support each other. So that's something worth having. Remember, time is precious and you can't get it back. Well, I'm going to end it. I'm John Johnson. This is Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.